Hey, Steph.
Hey, Nikon. Nice to see
Welcome.
you again.
Yes, lovely to see you again. Welcome back to our Your Inner Power series. And we're on part three. So, the last time we spoke about what state of mind is and how understanding it changes everything. So, today I wanted to ask you about where stress comes from stress, overwhelm, burnout, and why you don't need to suffer it, even with a busy life. Because oftentimes we think that, oh, if I can be really successful and have a busy life, but I have to do it with all of these really stressful emotions or experiences like burnout and stress. And I'm going to hand this over to you.
Oh, thank you. Actually, coming from a background where I owned a design company for 20 years, I had pretty much the same idea of what stress was as I think most of the world has. So I thought that, well, I'm working 12, 14 hours a day. I've got so many things that I'm juggling. I need to make decisions. They need to be the right decisions. And so I very much struggled with being effective in that kind of role. It was like I had to just keep going on the hamster wheel, no matter how difficult it felt, no matter what state of mind I was in. I just had to keep going. And the message from the world is that's kind of the inevitable result of the kind of life we lead in this world today. The more things we have to juggle, the more information there is, the more tied to success we are. The inevitable outcome is at some point that we will suffer chronic stress, and for some people, burnout. In fact, I used to work with a company, a big retail company, who had for their leadership team, they had a recognized policy that when the inevitable burnout would come for their leaders, they would be moved sideways into a job that wasn't quite so responsible and was easier for them. So it's like this is a built-in kind of misunderstanding that people have, that stress is something that we have to experience and we have to manage.
I had an insight. Isn't it interesting, right? Like you almost expect it now. Like, oh, okay, the more I grow in my the more successful I get, just the more stress I'm going to have to take on. And it's just something I'm going to have to deal with. So I should be prepared now and think of habits or things. And so what you're saying, and in our understanding, is that that simply isn't true. You can perform at the highest levels, lead at the highest levels without suffering from overwhelm and stress. And I'm just thinking about something. Listen to this. I'm like, okay, that sounds great, Steph. How do you do
Yeah,
it?
sounds great.
Yeah, it
How
sounds
do I
great.
do that?
How do I do this?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, there are leaders in the world who obviously head up some huge organizations that don't experience as much stress as I did, when I had my design company. It's the first misunderstanding is that this is universal and it is inevitable, and that is just not borne out by the facts. We just see the people that are stressed, and we see the people that suffer, but that's not true of everybody.
I
So
first got a hint of this for me as you were sharing is that as
Mhm.
in my former life as a professional taekwondo player, I noticed the world champions that I admired, Olympic champions, how calm and cool they were in the biggest matches. And I was like, wow, I wish I could be like that. Like just be as calm and cool. And then I was reading something by our mentor, our mutual colleague, Michael Neal, and he shared something from the Tao Te Ching that said, be as calm in the beginning as at the end. And I think there's something to that that's pointing to what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. I think there's I think one of the things that happens in today's society, and again did happen with me, is that we attach ourselves, we identify with the outcome and being successful and being seen to be successful. So that is such a a strong motivator for us to work too hard and worry too much. We kind of take on this image of ourselves of needing to be this strong person, and that component can contribute to what it feels like is we have to control events, we have to control circumstances in order for them to play out the way we need them to play out, in order for us to be okay, in order for us to fulfill our role as being, the successful one, which is very natural, but it's not helpful. If it's a part of the misunderstanding is that the harder we work and the more we think about things, the more we worry about things, the more motivated we will be to keep all our ducks in a row, keep keep things controlled, keep things manageable. But that, I think, is what contributes to the level of stress where we do burn out, because our minds and our bodies say, no more, no more, not doing that again, I'm going to bed. No. And then we take that as a sign of weakness. But the thing that's really powerful for me, the biggest misunderstanding is we think that stress is created by events and circumstances outside of us. We don't even consider for 1 minute that stress is a feeling. It's actually quite a physical feeling, or was for me. It kind of affected my nervous system. I would get stomach aches and all sorts of things. And so it just felt like there was such a strong link between what was happening in the moment, what I wasn't able to control, that wasn't happening the way I wanted it to do, and the way I felt. It looked so obvious to me that that's what the problem was. But what you and I know, and what has literally changed my whole life, is that the feelings we have, the emotions we have, the experience of life that we're having, the experience of stress is a feeling. And therefore, it can only come from my perception of what's happening. It can only come from what's going on in my mind. What is actually happening outside of us is, and this might be controversial, but this is how I think about it, is just data. It's just information. How I deal with it is through my own mind and my own conditioning and my own worries and fears and attachments. It's filtered through all those things, and then that creates the experience, that creates the feeling of stress. So why is it useful to know that? It's useful to know that because when we can step back for a moment and see what's actually happening. So for me, what would happen is I would get concerned about, oh, this isn't happening how I want it to, or my to-do list is just way too long for me to ever manage. What's going to happen when I can't do that? All of a sudden, my mind is focused on the worst case scenario in the future. It's looking at it's my mind trying to keep me safe, but is in effect, it's debilitating, you know. And I can do that, and then I can look back in the past and say, well, this is what happened when that happened, and I messed up with that as well, therefore that's what's going to happen this time. So what happens is when we pay attention to what's going on in our mind, we kind of lose sight, we lose ourselves in the experience of, in my world, was like potential failure. So the stepping back, the noticing that that's what I'm doing, noticing that I am feeling this lump in my stomach, you know, this stone in my stomach, knowing that I am feeling real discomfort and beginning to suffer, is actually not what we think it is. That feeling is a signal from our intelligence, from our deeper part of ourselves, that's saying, hang on a second, you're not in reality at the moment. You're not in this moment. You're not just dealing with what's in front of you. You're dealing with what you're imagining, all the things, all the possible ramifications and outcomes of this imagined situation. That's what you're feeling, and that's what you're trying to deal with. There's a massive value in being able to see that the way our system works, the way our nature works, is perfectly designed. When we are in discomfort for any reason, all that is telling us is that we're not in reality. We are not thinking straight. We are not in this moment. And the only time we can ever be effective is when we're present in this moment. We're not designed to be resourceful and effective when we're thinking about the future. We're not designed to be effective and resourceful when we're thinking about the past. We can only ever deal with what's in front of us when we come back to this moment. And that's what stress does. It takes us away from this moment. takes us away from our natural, innate capability to rise to the occasion and do what needs to be done. And there is something very powerful about seeing that, even just getting a glimpse of it, seeing how that plays out in our life. Because when we begin to see that, the feelings of stress take on a different meaning. They don't mean anything about what's going on outside of us. They're just a friendly nudge from the universe saying, come back, come back. And the other thing that I wanted to say about burnout is when we're on the golden hamster wheel and we're efforting and we're pushing through our mental and physical barriers in order to keep up, in order to put another tick on the to-do list. When we're pushing through, we're using our intellect to give us the energy to do that. And that's where burnout comes from. The energy that's required to control life, to control the world to the extent that we need it to stop us from feeling stress. We're not designed for that. There is another source of energy, and everybody will know what it feels like to be engaged with a project or a sport or a creative outpouring. There's the when we get so absorbed in what we're doing that time seems to fly by, that there's a feeling of inspiration and passion and joy to it. That is a different kind of energy. It comes from a deeper place. And so that is available for us to tap into whenever we come back to the present moment, whenever we come back to what is real and not what is imagined. I think, I'm making this up, but the people that are really successful and really creative and very productive and don't appear to have the same effects of stress in their lives, I think they have learned to tap into what is their innate inspiration and energy. I think they have found a way of being able to fulfill their potential in life because they maybe not consciously understand how it works, but they found a way probably early on where it just felt natural for them to tap into that. That's how it looks to me. But when we're living more from that place, everything gets easier. We're more loving, kind, compassionate, inspired, and creative. That was a long one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a long one. but it was lovely. I heard so much in that. I two things come to mind. I remember when I had a very I was in a senior management level position at big corporate, and I was having a really, really rough time. And I called you. And I was sitting on my kitchen floor and I was just overwhelmed. I was stressed out of my mind. And you brought me back because we had a conversation and you said, come back. And I couldn't let go of all these thoughts. There are things I need to control that I felt powerless against, these impossible KPIs and OKRs for my job. And then you brought me back to being really present and noticing. I remember you told me, look, Nikon, you have food in your fridge, you have a roof over your head, you have money in your bank account, you're okay. You're okay. And I remember you brought me back to center. And as I came back to center, I started to feel better because my mind started to let go of the this overthinking, and it came
Yeah.
back to being present. And from that present, I couldn't I could better navigate where I was from rather than trying to navigate from a place where I wasn't, which was in my head. And I can't tell you how helpful that was. And another case study comes to mind. I remember I was asked to coach a high potential at a big tech firm, and she was head of talent acquisition. And over a year, we worked together, and she became much more responsive to life because before she was very reactive. Things would happen, and she was working with like in the HR, right? Talent acquisition. She would get so emotional when things didn't work out her way, or arguments with her CEO, and she would get so emotional, and it would get in the way of her being at her best. And over the year we worked together, she became less reactive and much more responsive to her work and to herself. She learned how to listen to herself, trust her instincts, because I think what you're talking about is when you learn what we're talking about, you learn not to listen so much to stress and overwhelm and burnout. You learn to listen to the voice within. And you know what, Steph, within a year, she became head of people,
Oh,
which
wow.
is the highest position in HR in this very powerful tech company. And within a month of that position, all these other heads of people from all these big tech firms had contacted her to to be a part of their little club or whatever. But I think that's what's on offer here is when you really learn when you really hear what we're talking about, so much more becomes available to you, and that you can lead and excel without the stress and burnout. Like you almost rise above it. And I think today I'm very grateful to you. Like today, I have a very successful taekwondo business. I was doing the numbers today. Steph, every week, me and my team, we teach about 200 to 300 students a week over 3 cities.
Wow.
And none of us are stressed or burnt out. And we really enjoy what we're doing. And it's
Yes.
easy. I almost feel guilty at how effortless it feels. But I think that's what's on offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's a huge misunderstanding because
Mm.
people assume that stress and burnout is inevitable. And it really, really isn't if you understand what's going on. And it doesn't take, it doesn't take years of learning. It doesn't take a lot of study. Even if you just begin to get a glimpse of what's going on in your mind and how that is connected to the way that you're feeling, the way that you're experiencing life in the moment, that that's enough for you to take, just to kind of say to yourself, there's something wrong with this picture. Let's just take a step back instead of carrying on the hamster wheel. Just kind of step off it for a moment, and that's enough to bring us back to this moment, back to reality, back to what's really true. And that's where we are at our most resourceful.
I think that's a great place to put a pin on it for this episode. And we'll be back in our next session to talk about what our natural state is and how we can really get in touch with that space regardless of circumstance, and how that space is naturally filled with ease, grace, and flow. So thank you so much, Stef, for your time and for just sharing what you know and what you see.
Oh, bless you. Thank you for sharing your experience of it as well, because I think that's really valuable for people to be able to hear real world examples, you know.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to stop recording and we'll be back in our next session. All right. Thank you, Stef.
Okay. Thank you, Nikon.
Bye.